So welcome, Cathy. As you know, this is part of a series that I'm doing, an interview series with beautiful women like yourself. It's called A Woman's Rite of Passage to Self-Love. And like you know, I'm speaking to various women who have been through difficult, joyful, ups and downs parts of their life, so transitions that they've gone through. For some it's been grief, for some it's been loss, for some it's been, you know, real radical changes. And I know personally, I don't know you that well, but I think I've known you for 2 or 3 years now. I think I met you at a party, was it?
Yes, party at Sharon's.
Might have been Sharon. So thank you, Sharon, if you're listening on in one day.
And we found out we had a mutual friend in Debbie, and you knew all about, or knew something about me, and I knew something about you because she'd mentioned us to each other.
Exactly. So we sort of put some pieces together, I believe, and went, oh, okay, that's you and that's me. So thank you for being on today. I know you fitted this in between basketball games and what have you, so I appreciate that. And it's a holiday here in New Zealand, so thank you for your time today. So when I say radical transition, for me, when I look at you and know the very little that I do know about you, you have been through amazing transition, not just something that's happened quickly, but over time, yeah? Are you able to tell us something of that transition?
Yeah, so in particular, I guess we're talking, in fact, I'm transsexual, so I lived a lot of my life outwardly to everyone in the world as male, even though internally that wasn't necessarily how I felt. And then in fact, just over 10 years ago, I transitioned to living as I now am as Cathy as a woman. And that was in itself was a process that took about 18 months, started about 18 months prior to that, the actual, if you like, physical part of the transition.
So I'm curious, I'd love to ask more about that, because we could easily sit here and not address these things, but I think we're here to enlighten women out there as to what that's about. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what were some of those things in that 18 months that occurred for you?
Sorry?
What were some of those things in that 18-month period and beyond that have occurred for you in the transition of becoming one?
I think just prior to that, something important probably is that people say, oh, well, you're a woman now. I guess I've felt I've been a woman all the time. I was just living in disguise prior to that. So, you know, that puts some things in context that, so in terms of I'd always known there'd been something different about me, and I guess it's, you have one of those light bulb moments when you finally decide, well, you've got to stop actually kidding yourself or trying to live a life that's a lie, and you've got to be true to yourself. And once you open that box and make that admission, then you can't put it back in and shut the box. And that was, yeah, roughly 18 months before I finally transitioned.
So what was that light bulb moment? Was it a feeling within your body or within your spirit, or what was it that, how could you describe that?
It had been building up, because I kind of knew it was there, but you kind of kept denying it because the whole thought of doing it was so scary. And literally was sitting like this at the computer one night, and it's just kind of, something just went click, and it was like, you know, you've just got to be realistic. You can't, you know, this is who you are, this is what you've got to do. You can't go on living like this. And once you get to that stage, it becomes a pretty easy decision, because it's like carry on like this and that'll end to, you know, madness or suicide or something very
major destruction.
And actually makes the option of doing something about it the sensible and easy one. Everyone says you're brave, and it's kind of, well, actually no, because the other options were so much worse.
So you followed the easier path in some ways, but the truer path, I hear, yeah? The truer path for you.
So the path pretty much was to I guess make sure that it was the right thing. So I went and had some counselling through Auckland Sexual Health that look after the gender stuff in Auckland. There was a very good counsellor there that I had a number of sessions with, and you have to do part of that anyway as a gatekeeper role, because you can't start the physical part of the transition, the taking hormones, till someone ticks the box and says to your doctor it's okay. But from my point of view, it was more just...
Can they say no, Cathy? Can they say no at that point? Is someone else given that
They
authority to actually override what you as a woman know within?
It's getting less so, but certainly 10 years ago when I did it, they could, and there were ways around that. There were doctors where you could get prescriptions without that, but if you wanted to go through the mainstream path, that was what you needed to do. Certainly a lot of the work behind the scenes is to turn it into an informed consent model rather than a gatekeeper model, and that's gone quite a way down the track in the last 10 years.
So looking back at that counselling, what do you remember as kind of the key important stuff that you addressed or had those light bulb moments about? What was helpful about that support?
Yeah, it was really interesting because it was not actually what I expected, probably because I'd never had counselling before. It was not something I'd ever done. And it was more just talking about your history. In that case, it was kind of what was your sexual history and how did you feel at various times, and there were quite a lot of light bulb moments in that of kind of, I guess understanding a bit more why I always felt a bit of an outsider at school, even amongst your groups of friends. I always felt more comfortable sitting with the girls than doing stuff with the boys, but you couldn't do that because that, back in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't a done.
That was a no-go zone.
It was kind of a no-go zone, and you wouldn't even dream about it. And there were just various.
So you didn't get out the elastics in those days, Cathy. Do you remember that elastic game?
Yeah.
It would have been the go in those days, huh?
Just had to watch all that.
So what was your memory? Just looking back, you're talking about childhood and stuff. What was your memory of going through puberty?
I guess it was a bit difficult, and probably more so because I was an only child, so there wasn't anyone coaching you or telling you what was expected, and you had all these other thoughts at the same time, but the other thoughts were more just, I'm really weird, I like occasionally dressing up in my mother's clothes, but you had no understanding of what it was because there was no internet, there probably was some literature, but you wouldn't have known where to find it. There were no
in a cupboard somewhere with a lock and key probably.
Paper all the time or documentaries on TV, so it's just, I'm weird, I've got to hide this from everybody because I don't want people to think I'm weird. That's too scary. So
what do you remember about your body as a growing teen?
I guess I didn't have any of those huge body issues that some people say they do. It was I mean, I think there was a little bit of a disconnect, but there was never a hate of where you were or what was happening. It was just recognition that wasn't kind of quite you. But again,
did you have a fascination? This is an odd question, but did you have a fascination with the young woman of that day who you were mixing and mingling with, and looking at their emerging body as a young woman? I mean, were you that or what?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was all interesting, but again, at school you were quite disconnected, I guess, from a lot of that. It was quite hard to, because the boys and the girls tended to hang in their groups pretty much.
Sure.
At that kind of age, so that was interesting.
So knowing what you know now, I mean, what's your opinion about, I mean, you've got a couple of daughters, and what's your opinion then about sexual education and how that's addressed these days in the school?
I'm very supportive that there's probably a lot more than what we had back in the day, which was pretty basic. I think it's good to do that, and they seem to come out with a reasonably good understanding of where they need to go. So I'm not. I think it's great that the schools do that. It's probably easier for the kids and less embarrassing than their parents doing it with them. Not to say parents don't do some of it as well, but there's kind of always a cringe factor I remember my mother basically just gave me a book and said, go away and read this book.
Exactly. I wonder if it was the green one that I had. I was talking to another woman the other day, and we were of similar era, the three of us, and I had a green book. I still remember the size of it, the look of it, even the feel of it, and it was tucked away in my side cupboard, and I even remember what that looked and smelled like, that thing, and I occasionally pulled it out and got my little light under the pillow and, started reading it, and certainly didn't understand it, and certainly don't remember ever feeling comfortable going to mum and going, hey, what's this really about? I had no idea, really. We were really.
It was a brown one I had. It was something. It wasn't called that, but it was something like Janet and John Grow Up. It was. Oh. I'm sure there was a Janet in it, but a long time ago.
So, if we could have a fuller education in schools or within our communities around sexuality, what else would you include?
Well, I think definitely, and I suspect they do. I'm not that au fait with it, but I think there is a great need these days to talk about sexual and gender diversity, so people understand that it's a thing and that it's a possibility, and they're not the only ones in the world that feel like that.
I think that's true, Cathy. It's just
there are some great programs with the likes of Rainbow Youth Work in Auckland and around the place, so I think a lot of that is there now. And certainly people can and do transition at school, which would have been absolutely fantastic. It would have saved not wasting a lot of your life, but going through a lot of pain that you didn't need to go through.
Yeah. So my guess is that this transition has really been around your sexuality, sure, but B, about really being true to yourself. Is that right?
More about being true to yourself. I mean, I could say my sexuality hasn't changed. I've always been attracted to women. Just because I'm now living as a woman, I'm seen as being in the gay community rather than being in the straight community.
Interesting.
My actual attraction, I say it hasn't changed. It's probably fair that I'd be more open. And I'm not attracted to men in general, but I think, and I think this is true of a lot of people, I think you're actually attracted to people, and I could never say that a man might not come along that I'd feel attracted to. I very rarely do feel attracted to them, but I wouldn't absolutely say that's not a possibility. And I've known, I knew a straight woman who ended up having a relationship with another woman just because she fell in love with that woman. She was attracted to men, but she fell in love with that particular woman because there was something between them. And then when they broke up, she went back to a relationship with a man. And so
she found love rather than gender, yeah?
Yeah. And I think that's largely true, that it can cross over some of those boundaries, as long as people's minds aren't so closed as to reject that possibility.
So here's another tricky question for me to ask, but I'm fascinated with the hormonal aspect of your transition. How has that been? What was involved there, and what does that feel like for you?
So yes, once I'd been through the counselling and then held off a little bit while I was trying to sort things out with my then wife, because I was married at the time this all started. So you start taking hormones initially at fairly low doses. And
those hormones are what? Estrogen?
Estrogen. In my case, it was only estrogen to start with. Some people also take a testosterone blocker, but it turned out that I had relatively low levels, and the estrogen alone was enough to suppress the testosterone.
But as women, we still have testosterone in our bodies, yeah?
Yes. Yeah. So the aim is to get the testosterone down to female levels, which are about 10% of the level that a male would normally have. 10% depending on the range. And there was a huge, the day I took the first one, I can still remember that was just such a defining day. It was like, finally I'm on, the journey started, and emotionally felt quite changed immediately. And I know some of that was from the actually having got to that stage, but some of it was definitely from the hormones, because they have some physical effects, but they certainly have some emotional ones.
Yeah. So what are those physical and what are those emotional effects? Because
well, you actually become a lot more emotional. So I certainly cry a lot more and a lot more easily now than I ever used to. And the really weird thing is I cry when I'm happy. I'd never cried in the past when I was happy. Now I read something with a happy ending and I'll start bawling my eyes out.
Hey, why not?
It could never have happened prior to taking the hormones. So there is definitely an effect on that. But there's also physical effects. So it changes essentially your fat distribution from the male pattern to the female pattern. So you start putting on fat around your hips and your bum.
Yeah, so we're getting more our shape, we're getting our curves. Yeah.
So you start and your face tends to soften, your skin softens, which is really lovely. And it doesn't do away with the body hair, but it does slightly reduce it. But then the facial hair it does nothing to, so you've got to go through very painful IPL and or electrolysis, which in fact years later I'm still doing once a month to go through that, and I've done literally hundreds of hours and spent literally thousands of dollars on. In fact, that's been the most expensive part of the process. Not to mention the most painful.
Yowza. So when you're saying that about those hormones and that beautiful effect of bringing you more into your curves, it just, for me, resonates, and I really get a sense of really coming home within the fullness of your womanly body. Is that what it helps you do?
Yeah.
It's really
so it certainly makes you feel, when you start growing breasts, and it's exactly like when a young girl does, they start slowly, they're incredibly painful, and that was one of the harder bits to hide, because I was still living at home with my children and nobody knew, and they'd jump into bed and jump on your chest and you'd be going, it hurts.
Yeah. It's like
couldn't say why.
Got it. Okay, and so then they further develop, much like you would as you're going through puberty, or?
Yeah, so the bulk of the development's over the first 2 years. So even over the first 10 to 12 months, you get reasonable development, and then they say it carries on for 5 to 6 years, and then pretty much stops. So pretty much the same pattern as a girl going through puberty. Although usually a little less growth, but some people get a lot, some people get not much. Most get somewhere in the middle.
So in that transition, obviously with any transition we go through as women, there's physical stuff, which is obviously huge, the emotional stuff, mental, and all the rest. But I'm just wondering, is there a spiritual element to this for you as well? Or a soulful element? I don't know how to sort of ask.
I mean, to me it was actually being able to, and I guess you'd say it's soulful, to actually live as who you'd always been, and that was hugely liberating. And once you'd gone through the actual shit of the transition and having to tell everybody and fighting the newspapers who were trying to write articles about you when you didn't want stuff written, and there were family things and business things and all that, but once you'd gone through all that, it was kind of like, finally I'm actually who I am. I can be true to myself. I can be, and I actually, and it might sound funny, I think I actually became somewhat less shy through all that. I've always been quite a shy, introverted person, and I won't say I'm a huge extrovert now, but I'm definitely a lot more comfortable with myself, and that reflects on how you interact with other people.
Absolutely.
And my whole attitude from when I transitioned was, this is me, I like me, so why wouldn't you like me? If you don't, pity.
Nice. And these women struggle with that. They struggle with their self-image and their self-worth and who they are, and they struggle with often their body stuff. So what would you be saying to women out there who are angsting over what we would see as petty little things?
No, I think I think everybody does it, and I certainly do it as well. But I think you've got to look at to me, it's always looking at the bigger picture. It might be, or your tummy might be a bit bigger than you like, or I don't especially like my hair, which I don't have enough of, or whatever. But it's kind of like, well, that's not defining who I am. That's just a part of it. So it's like, I still like the whole me, and that's what I've got to look at.
one thing I do with women is a body gratitude practice, and that gets away from our body parts and whether we love them or hate them. Yes, we can certainly become more intimate with them, but a body gratitude idea from a more holistic perspective. You know, what has my body got me through? You know, when I consider what you've been through and the amazingness and the beauty of your body and what it has done and grown and changed and, you know, adapted to, I just think it's amazing, huh?
Yeah.
What are you most grateful to your body for?
I mean, I'm just grateful that at my age and particularly with the fact that I did this late in my life, that at the moment anyway, my body seems to be holding together. I can still do active things. So I've had 10 years living as a woman and hope to have a number more when I can carry on doing lots of things. So I'm 59. I can still actively do sport. I can still, you know, walk, run. I've just managed to lose 8 kilos in the last 6 months. So, you know, it's great that you can do that. And yes, you do start feeling your age, and that if you get an injury, it seems to take longer to recover, and you know, your knees get a bit creaky walking upstairs and things, but it's
So
still,
what's your impression of what society is telling us about aging as a woman? I mean, you and I mean, you're 59, I'm just heading into 50. I mean, we've got numbers of years left, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what's your take, or how are you going to go into your next 10, 20, 30 years of being a woman the best way you can?
I certainly want to carry on as I am. I don't want my age to define me, and I don't think so far it does. That I just want to keep on doing everything I can as long as I can, and in fact keep on taking on new things. I've learned to dive, for instance, you know, relatively later in my life, but again, it's something
like diving and windsurfing, is it? And basketball?
Yeah,
Basketball.
Yeah, basketball. So they're my 3 most active things, apart from running around after my children. So, and I must admit, having children later in life, so that I've still got relatively young teenage children, I think helps keep you young, because you're doing stuff with them and you're trying to keep up with them, and it's, I think that's actually been quite good and quite helpful.
So I can't remember, Cathy, but were your parents around when you transitioned?
No, my mother died when I was 21, when I was in my last year at university. And as my mum and dad split up when I was quite young, and I was an only child brought up with her, that was huge. And my dad died 15, 16 years ago, so 5 or 6 years before I transitioned. So neither of them knew about that part of me. Well, my mother did find me dressed in her clothes one day, but I kind of passed it off as I'll try your clothes on kind of deal. It was when I was about 8 or 9.
So what's your take? I think one of the last times we spent together at your place, you had the photo of your mum, I think. So how do you connect with your mum and know that she's around and know what she's feeling about, you know, and whether she's proud of you or how she's feeling about you at the moment? Do you know that?
I think I do. Yeah, I think I do, and I certainly think I know how she would have reacted. She and I were quite similar as with my older daughter, and you know, I do communicate sometimes when I sit in that sanctuary space where the photo is. When I go to the graveyard where her ashes were spread, I kind of stand and commune and talk to her and say, well, this is where I'm at in my life, and what do you think? And I think I hear some answers, or I hear what I think she would have said.
And what is that?
I believe she would have been very supportive. She was a very understanding and open kind of person, and we had a very strong relationship as far as that goes.
Very, very lucky. So who are the other inspiring women in your life? Who have you looked up to or read about or been, you know, admire that have really helped you along your path as a woman?
I had one friend who really helped me going through the transition, that I told quite early about it, who just was And she lived in another part of the country, so it was conversations were mainly over the phone, except occasionally when we happened to be in the same place. But she was just amazingly understanding and supportive. She'd gone through a lot of challenges in her own life, through major depression and almost committing suicide, and then it ended up actually working initially as a consumer representative, and later actually was quite a high-level manager in the mental health area, and she got quite high up in that. And she was killed in an accident just before I actually completed my not even complete transition, but before I actually did the day when I packed away the male clothes and got out the female ones. And went to her funeral and found that not only was she supporting me in that way, she was supporting about 20 other people on their own journeys and paths. She's just one of these huge
heart givers, hey? I mean, a real soul sister to many by the sounds of it.
That had huge issues in her own life, solo mother and constant battle with depression and various other things, but she just gave so hugely to other people.
So how as a woman do you juggle that typical inherent thing in us women that we want to give to others and do for others and spend time with and for others? I mean, how do you juggle looking after yourself in there as well? So self-care really is what I'm asking, over and above everybody else, because obviously you was a huge caregiver.
Yeah, and I try and do that, but I'm a bit bad. I'm one of these people that finds it really hard to say no, and I'm one of these people that seems to always...
You haven't learned that word yet.
I have learned it a bit better lately, but it's still, if you see someone that needs some help, whatever it is, I'm a practical person, I'm a problem solver, I'm a kind of, so it's like, you immediately offer to go and help solve the problem if you think you can. And sometimes, yes, you've just got to learn that whilst that's great to do, you've got to actually consider your own health and well-being, and the fact you've got children to look after and a business to run, and you've got to keep yourself in a good place. So occasionally you've got to learn to say, well, although I feel I should be doing something to help, I actually can't, or I can do this much to help, but I can't do that much.
As women, we seem to have this huge sense of guilt, don't we?
Yeah, but you do. I still feel guilty about it when I say no, and that's the hard part. It's like sometimes is it easier to say yes and not feel guilty than beat yourself up.
So just to wrap up, we have all these emotions as women. We have a lot of responsibility for others, but for me, one of my favorite women in the world is Mama Gina. She's this American woman, and she's about women and their pleasure. And I think as women, often we don't address or indulge in our own pleasure needs because we get far too busy. I call it pursuit driven rather than pleasure driven. So what's your take on pleasure as a woman and your experience of pleasure as a woman? What are the greatest joys of being a woman and the greatest pleasures of being a woman for you?
One of my greatest pleasures is actually just having some chill out time by myself. I just love finding somebody comfortable, sitting down with a good book, relaxing, doing whatever. That to me is sheer heaven when I can get to do it. Being able to mix with other groups of women sometimes when you can find the right circumstances is really great. Yeah, so they're some of the things for me that I really enjoy and help fill my soul, I guess.
So simple pleasures, they're often the best.
Yeah.
We don't have to spend lots of money on them or go and necessarily do them a lot, but it's defining what does, like you say, fill our soul. So anything else, Cathy, that you'd like to share with us? Some fantastic wisdom, and thank you for being so real and honest today. Anything else that you'd like to share with us before we finish?
I think just from me, the not message, because that sounds preachy, but I think that whatever situation you're in, if you can actually be true to yourself and live the true you, it does take care of a lot of other things in your life. It just makes everything else so much more comfortable. If you're living a lie and having to put a face to the world that's not you, that just destroys you internally. It eats you up, and you may not even realise how much. And I've certainly seen a couple of examples of other people that have gone through what I have, where they've been really angry and really quite nasty individuals until they have the courage to become who they truly are, and suddenly they don't just transition from, in that case, male to female, but their whole attitude and emotional response transition. And I wasn't quite like that. It was, if things are eating you up inside, that's got to affect how you present to the world and how you are.
Absolutely.
If you can get rid of some of that, I mean, we can never get rid of everything because we all have issues going on all the time. But if you can get rid of a major thing like that, that really does transition your whole life around.
Great. And in terms of, if people are really resonating with what you've been talking about today, is there a way that they can get hold of you, or a group that you'd recommend that they, take a look at?
In New Zealand, there's a number. There's one in Auckland called Gender Bridge, who have a Facebook page. There's another New Zealand-wide group called Agender, Agender, who again are on Facebook, who can provide some support to people around those kind of things.
Great. Hey, you've been awesome, Cathy. Hey, and for you other women out there, if you're keen to either be interviewed or love what we're talking about here, you can come to www.janellefletcher.com, or somebodybeautiful.com is way easier to remember because it's about being beautiful as a woman. So thank you, Cathy. Love you to bits, and thank you so much today.
Thank you. Cheers, Janelle.
Bye.
Bye.